Hello, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, whenever and wherever you are. My name is Anna Rochelle, and today we are going to talk about solving quadratic equations, but we're only going to talk about just the square roots piece of that, okay? So, of course, as usual, there's always some sort of a mistake, right? Throughout the squared. So we know that when something is squared, in order to unsquare it, we have to take the square root of it, right? So when we square root this 78, we know that 78 is not a perfect square, but we also know that we can simplify 78. We can break it down into two equal pieces, right? So for example, in this case, it's going to be 2 times 39. And both of those are not perfect squares, which kind of stinks, but it is what it is. So then we know right away that the square root of 78 just has to stay the square root of 78. So x is going to be both positive and negative square root of 78. And we know that it's going to be both positive and negative because when we take negative times negative, it's going to be positive, and we take positive times positive, it's still going to be a positive number, right? So let's take a look at this one. What happens when I add 4 here? Right? Our goal is always, when solving an equation, our goal is always to have that x by itself, right? So I'm going to use inverse operations. And the only inverse operation that I have for an exponent is a radical. So in this case, I'm going to take the square root of 81 and x, and I'm going to end up with x equals both positive and negative 9. Because 81 is a perfect square, right? So final solution, right? So this one is going to be kind of the same. And notice how each problem that I'm doing is having, like, I'm adding another piece to the puzzle, right? I'm adding another piece. So I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to add 6 here and add 6 here. I'm going to end up with 4x squared equals 80. Divide both sides by 4, right? And then I'm going to end up with x squared equals 20. And then again, I'm back to this point. I'm going to go ahead, I'm going to square root both sides. Yeah. X is going to be, well, 20 is actually 20. We can actually simplify to 4 and 5. And because 4 is a perfect square, it's going to go outside of the radical. I kind of call it like they go out on a date, because usually 2 people go out on a date. When the third person comes out on a date, it's kind of like a little awkward. So that 5, because it's not a perfect square, it's going to stay in the radical. It's going to stay home. So then I'm going to get 2 root 5. And again, it's going to be both positive and negative. Now, one thing that you may be thinking is, how the heck did you get 2 when there was a 4 here? What's happening? Okay, so what's happening is, realistically, it's root 4 times root 5. And we all know that the square root of 4 is 2. So it's going to be 2 root 5. That's where I got the 2 from. Okay. So, and then this would be my final answer here. Okay. You can always pause this video at any time and attempt to solve the problems on your own, and then double check and see what I got, right? Or you can just continue and watch and soak in all this knowledge. Okay, so we don't have anything to add or subtract because everything is inside the parentheses. So I need to get rid of this parentheses, and I need to get rid of the square root. So I'm going to go ahead and square root both sides. So in this case, I'm going to have x minus 4, because the square root is going to like cancel out the squared. And so I'm only going to have one parentheses of x minus 4. And that's going to equal both positive and negative 4. So now I kind of have 2 separate equations. Now, most students, when I work with them, they tend to be like, oh, Anna, I don't need two equations. I can do this on my own. It's not a problem at all. And then they make a mistake. So if you're new to this, if you're new to doing this type of problem, don't get super cocky and don't be like, I got this. Just take a step back, do the two equations. After you've done like, I don't know, thousands of problems like I have, then you can be super cocky. And even still, I still do two separate equations. So, okay. So then I have +4 and -4. I'm essentially taking this and breaking it into two separate equations. Here's my positive, here's my negative. I'm still going to add 4 to both, right? Because I'm still doing inverse operations, right? So here I'm going to have x is 8, and here I'm going to have x is 0, right? Okay. So both seem like they are both very appropriate solutions, so I'm going to choose both. Okay. This one, we do have something attached to the parentheses, so I'm going to somehow get rid of this 10. I'm not going to distribute it because then that's going to give me too much of a headache. I'm going to divide both sides by 10, and I'm going to have x minus 7 is 44. Okay. Again, we're back to this same spot here. So now what we're going to do is we're going to take the square root of each of them. Now, realistically speaking, when I have this x minus 7 equals positive negative root 44, I believe root 44 we can simplify to get root 4 times root 11. And since this is a perfect square, I'm going to end up with x minus 7 equals positive 2 root 11, right? Because this is a 2. And x minus 7 equals negative 2 root 11. Okay. So then I'm still going to add 7 to both sides. But because these are not like terms. One of them has a root 11, one of them doesn't. So what we're going to do is we're just going to leave it as is, kind of like treat that root 11 like a variable, right? So in this case, I'm going to have x is 7 plus 2 root 11, and x is also 7 minus 2 root 11. You may remember from the quadratic formula that you had something that looks like this. That's also a possible answer. So all three of these answers would be possible answers. It just depends on what for example, if you're taking a multiple choice test, what your multiple choice answers look like, right? If you have a teacher who's like very specific with the type of answers that he or she gives, that's totally fine. I think both are fully acceptable. I've seen answers being given in both cases, like both ways. It just depends on what the book is asking you for, what the multiple choice answers are, in what form are they given? Is it select all that apply, right? Things like that. So just be aware of what you're looking for. Okay, so this one, not only are we multiplying something by 9, but we're also adding 8. So when we undo my order of operations, we're going to start with subtracting that 8 first, because that 8 is going to help us undo order of operations, undo PEMDAS. So we're going to do SADMET, right? So we're going to be left with, 441. And then we're going to divide by 9. And honestly, if you know this off the top of your head, kudos to you. I do not. So then we're going to be left with this equals 49. And then I'm going to take the square root of each of these, correct? Right? Because we're back here at this point again, right? And so I'm going to have 2x minus 3 equals this positive negative 49, or root 49, or I know root 49 is 7, right? So I'm going to actually extend this screen. Hopefully that works. And I'm going to create the two equations, right? So I'm going to have this 2x minus 3 equals positive 7, 2x minus 3 equals negative 7, and I'm going to solve them the same way that I would just any regular middle school two-step equation. Add 3 to both sides. This one's going to be the same, right? Adding 3 to both sides. I'm going to have 2x equals 10 and 2x equals negative 4. I'm going to divide both sides by 2. And then I'm going to be left with x equals 5 and x equals -2. Again, both answers seem reasonable. It's very possible that sometimes your answers may not be reasonable. For example, if your square root is a negative number, that's an imaginary number. That's not possible, right? Like we don't want that. We want to exclude those answers, but they may not show up all the time, okay? So for our purposes, for this Algebra 1 review of Algebra 2, solving quadratic equations just using the square roots piece, I would leave both answers as your final answer, okay? I hope this video was helpful and I will see you in another video. Bye.